So this week's podcast is with Collette Whiting, who tells a story of how over a long period of time, like sort of 3 to 5 years, how she's been working on her fear. And one of the best bits that you'll get from this episode is that she shares some of her cognitive strategies and how she's used the growth mindset and lots of other great tools, lots of mind tools really to help herself get over the fear of flying. So check this one out. It's going to be a good one. So this week's podcast, we welcome Collette. Welcome, Collette.
Thank you.
It's got judging by the amount of detail that you've provided before, I know that there's going to be lots of stuff in here to help people who are scared of flying. So huge welcome to the podcast. And tell us a bit about yourself, Collette. You know, where you live, what you do, how you came across us, anything like that.
Yeah. No, thank you. No, so I'm it's a pleasure to be here and say I've been following Lovefly for a number of years now. And I found the Facebook group initially, I believe, or possibly the podcast first. I think I probably came across it on the podcast because I thought it would be a useful way that I was sure there must be something that exists that, speaks to the market of people like us that, have that fear of flying. And I think I remember searching the podcast, which then I discovered the Facebook group subsequently. And so I'm in Portsmouth on the south coast of the UK, and I run a business with my husband, which we manufacture oil filtration equipment. And my husband's always been the one that does the travel. He's got, avios points coming out of his ears because he just isn't scared of flying at all. It doesn't even enter his brain. But I would always usually be very, very happy staying at home and just, being a bit of a homebody and never jumping on the plane with him. But the past 12 months, I've made a real concerted effort to put myself out there and get out of my comfort zone. And I've ended up doing 17 flights in a 12-month period.
Oh, wow.
So I've kind of gone from one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
I went for a period of time, I think, where I hadn't flown a long haul flight in 20 years. I'd done maybe one flight a year to Italy, and that 2.5 hours, that was just enough. I just needed to get off that plane with that last half an hour to go. But I made that concerted effort that I wanted to shift my mindset and, and work on that and address that. So I could, start maybe joining him on these trips and going about the world and seeing a few places.
Well, yeah, I mean, but particularly if you've got the opportunity through your work to be able to do that, and then you're not doing it, that's so frustrating. So tell us about the beginning of the fear then. What was it all about?
I don't know if to this day I can still really pinpoint it. I think it's probably quite a common one for, women and mothers. I would maybe say once I have my children. I don't have a particular like light bulb, that's when my fear started. Because I remember as a child, I used to fly quite often. My dad's Scottish, so he was down in Portsmouth because he was in the Navy. So he settled down here for many years. And I remember as a child going up on the planes up to Scotland to see family. We did a family trip to Florida doing Disney when I was 12, 13. And then the last long haul flight I did was when I was 17, and we went to the Dominican Republic. And nothing negative that I can recall ever really happened from them. I don't know where it came from.
So when it started, what was it like for you?
It was trying to think. It was just this. I think I managed to trigger it down to when I joined the Lovefly group and I started deep diving into it a little bit more. I think I realized what was my problem is that I think I'm someone who has to be in control of my life quite a lot. I think I like to make sure everything's running, everything's smooth, and I'm that person that I'm that anchor that I just control everything, not in a negative way, but I'm juggling. No. Yeah, I have many spinning plates, and it's just. But once I step on that plane, I have to just accept that nothing's out in my hands anymore, and it's I have to. Well, do I trust the pilot? I don't even know the guy, and he's flying me somewhere, and my life are in his hands. And I think so. But it wasn't necessarily just the pilot's side of it. It was the mechanics of the plane, and I think that's where I came across the flight checklist. And I remember taking that, screenshotting it, and taking it on one of the first flights after I came across it, and it did help because I think for me a lot of it was that the sensations of the feeling that the plane's slowing down, and then and the noise abatement. And it was all, once I read this on this, this checklist, felt informed, and then sometimes I feel that knowledge is power, and by feeling informed, I felt, well, there's no need to worry about that. Actually, you know what that is. You know what that is. Yeah. And now I don't really need to refer to the checklist because it's just, I know the sensations now, and I'm like, that's normal.
So back when the fear started then, what would happen to you in terms of when it came to flying? So because the thing, because you've nicely sort of like nipped to the end, but I know you've done a lot of work. So perhaps you could sort of rewind a bit and say, when you first started having the fear, what would it mean in terms of, so did you just stop traveling, or did you travel but up with certain rules? How was it?
So I would say it was the avoidance. I just stopped traveling. I can't remember the length of time that went by before it took me to do like a short flight. But I would just complete avoidance of it. I just wasn't interested. I don't have that wanderlust in me, that some people want to travel and explore and see the world. I don't have that. So I was quite happy avoiding it all and blissfully just not going anywhere near the planes. But then what I found for me is that, say, finding the podcast gave me that ability to start fine-tuning where I needed to focus, because initially I saw a lot of posts where people were fearful of the turbulence. Never really bothered me, the turbulence. That wasn't part of it. The turbulence, because I think, you see so much, and it's like, it's drilled into you that turbulence is absolutely normal. It's completely fine. It's like a boat on the waves. The turbulence wasn't something that actually really ever concerned me, because I kind of was like, no, that's fine. That's normal. That's to be expected. So I think it was just more of a generalized anxiety, I think. So what I started doing last year was the shorter flights. So I went to Rotterdam, I went to Manchester, I went to Newcastle, and doing those shorter flights helped me build up that exposure to the airports and the planes. And
so Collette, just go back a little bit. What was the turning point then? Because you've been avoiding, and then you suddenly weren't. Why?
It was our business had grown to a point that, it started off a family-run business, husband and wife. And so we've got a team of 14 of us now. And I was starting to be able to kind of elevate myself within the business. So rather than being stuck in the weeds and doing all the day-to-day, I was at a point where, I'm still very busy and involved in a lot of things, but I was able to elevate myself more and start to be a bit more strategic thinking in the business, which meant also that the office can run without me being there. So when these opportunities started to present themselves, I kind of had no excuse, but the excuses weren't there anymore. And it was like, oh, I could go, I suppose. So it was like, yeah, well, okay, I'll do it. And yeah, it's nice because, like I said off before we started the podcast, my business exports globally. So, we recently won an award from the Department of Business and Trade for exporting globally. And so my husband's the one that's always off on the flights. Thank you. My husband's one always flying and traveling around the world, being there. He's just been everywhere. And it's not even a second thought to him to just hop on a plane. And yeah, so it's kind of like, it was nice to have that opportunity to start seeing some of our distributors and customers face to face, rather than having just that, email communication with them, but actually go and help build those relationships within your business, because you're getting to sit with the people that, you're dealing with all this time. And, it just makes it a bit more personal, actually getting to see them in real life.
Yes. So that was, it's one of those sort of situations. I was listening to that, I was thinking, I've come across many people who have the ability, either through, they've sold a business, or they've got to a financial situation where they can fly, but they don't fly. Or they have a business. Many people have a global business, and they've even got offices they've never been to, and you think, God, what must that be like? And so the similar one for you, now you're in a situation where you're getting these opportunities to travel, and you can, and you're like, I'm really pleased. So when did you start with us? And talk us through your actual process. And the reason behind the question is that people like to to hear options, because, it might be that if you dipped into lots of different resources or particular things you listened to or read, anything like that can be super helpful.
Yeah. So one resource that I did find useful was flight radar. My garden, I'm a bit on a flight path to Gatwick and Heathrow, because obviously where I'm on the coast and see it, I think the planes obviously come onto flying over land. So I sit in my garden quite often, and I would just bring up flight radar, scan the flight, and it was starting to build that exposure to me that these planes are coming from so many different places, and it's just so normal, this travel and what's going on and where people are, flying from and going about their daily lives and their business. And so just one resource, like I say, it was just going on flight radar and saying to my husband, oh, guess where that plane's come from? Or, if some of them would come from maybe the holiday destinations like Magaluf or Ibiza, I'll be like, oh, think of everyone out there right now. They're probably having a fantastic time.
Was he interested in that? Was he a bit like, oh,
He's not bothered.
I don't care where they come from.
But I find it really interesting because it's helping to add that flying is normal. It's
So,
done.
Collette, so was that the start of what you did as your process of just the flight radar, or was it, or
Combined with, I would say, the podcasts, so the Lovefly podcasts, the Facebook group, the checklist. I think the checklist was the very first real change I could see when going on a plane and having that checklist. It was, very reassuring. So definitely the checklist and flight radar were all the first steps in to get to the airport, I guess, and feel that I was doing something normal. It's not something.
So what point was that? Because I think I know where you are kind of now in terms of, you told me that, but at what point was that, the start of the podcast, the checklist? How far back are we talking?
I think it was 2022.
Okay.
Because I think I remember we went and booked a family holiday to Crete. It was a bit of a last minute thing. And I remember, like I say, I went with my two children, and my son was there. And obviously I can't remember how old he was at the time, maybe 5. And I was then put in that position where, he wasn't scared at all because obviously he's a 5-year-old without that awareness around him. But I kind of used him as a little bit of practice for myself and like that checklist. And I would be able to say to him, oh, guess what's happening now? This is happening now, or this is happening. And I think I even remember a nervous flyer being behind me and actually thinking to myself, oh, wow, I actually feel quite informed here. I feel quite, empowered by having this understanding now that this person behind me is really frightened. And actually, I actually feel like I've leveled up a little bit because I'm able to actually explain these things.
That's really cool. So 2022, and then you did that flight and you noticed an improvement. And then from then onwards, talk us through what sort of things you did and, like what the differences are that you started to notice perhaps.
Mm-hmm. I would say it was that mind shift in one of the things on the plane as well that used to really frighten me is that I think I felt like I was holding the plane up in the sky. Like I felt that my brain had to be holding that plane in the sky. And you can just feel that tension in your body because you're...
Just stop a second. I mean, you're an intelligent woman, right? When you hear yourself say that, do you ever think, what was I thinking?
I know. I 100%. Yes. You do just feel that you have to be willing the plane up to stay up. And Brilliant. It's exhausting. And then I think one of the things was accepting that, that you can't do that. That's impossible. Like you say, it doesn't make any mental sense that that's even possible. So it's just kind of releasing that.
And how did you do that? Because I think a lot of people can relate to that, where they have to concentrate the whole flight to make sure, I don't know. I used to call it, I call it in the book, the standby pilot, that you're kind of on duty.
I think it goes back to that 2022 flight. Having my children with me was a distraction. It helped distract me. I wasn't focusing on everything else in the plane. It was there. I was there with my children, and they provided that distraction. I think once I had realised I'd done it the first time with the men, it released that well, I don't have to do it again. Like I've already done it.
Yeah.
So I think, I think that definitely helped. And again, like something I found on either it was the podcast or the group was, your gut's lying to you. Cause I always think you've got that feeling of like your intuition and your instincts. And then having someone say to you, that's a lie. Like your gut is lying to you. It's, you're actually, like you say, when you're at that gate, you've actually about to start the stake as part of your journey. So your gut's completely lying to you. And that was another point. I think I need to have, I think in a way, like I like to be told that's just stupid. That's stupid. I kind of need that firmness with me. I need that. I don't want to be kind of pandered to. I just need that firmness. And then it helps me rationalize this.
Interesting. I hope that wasn't us that told you. Yeah. I know some of the pilots can be quite matter of fact, but I was thinking back now, has anyone said that? Has anyone been that firm? So were there any particular episodes that you found useful or any that you go back to? That because again, people like, because there's 240 odd now.
Yeah.
People like a little bit, if you can shortcut it a bit. What would you say?
I mean, the latest ones, because I had found that I was doing well with the fear of flying. And it was kind of like my brain needed to then focus on something else. And it was like, oh, you've never worried about the security before. Let's start to worry about the security of the airports and the people on the plane. And I was like, oh, that never even entered my mind before. So I did some research on the podcast and I found that you've got some episodes where I think you had someone from Virgin in who spoke, he used to be like head of security or something like that. Yeah. And I remembered listening to that one and another one because I just kind of wanted to hear a bit more about the background side of the work that goes in the airport. So I found those quite useful. When that started to creep in, I was like, no, let's just attend to this.
Yeah. Any others that crept? So that's the Andy Blackwell one. And I think there was another one where, I can't remember who it was. We had a pretty senior person who looked after it, was talking about the security and stuff. I mean, I can't remember which one that was now. If you can remember, that'd be great.
I know. I'll have to refer back to them and write the numbers down. Yeah.
And what about so how many of the podcasts would you say you've consumed?
I would say I've not had to listen to, like, I'm not saying tens and tens of them, because I think once you start on that journey of listening to the beginning few and then say finding the group and then deep diving into like what's your niche problem and then looking through, I would say probably like 10 to 15 or so. I've not needed to have that constant. I think that's one of the things I wanted to mention is that I fear that you can get into an anxiety like reassurance cycle. I think it's good to have a basic understanding of the flight safety and processes, but then excessive searching can become like a bit of a compulsion, and you're then going through that and say it's basically a cycle. So you're feeling anxious about something, you search for the information, you find some comfort, but it's just temporary unless you do the work in the background, because otherwise the anxiety is going to creep back in, and then you're just reinforcing that you need to research in order to feel safe. And I think that's something a trap that I know I can fall into. So I think it's kind of, once you say you listen to the podcasts and you start to understand the infrastructure around flying and the safety aspects of it, you need to then start trusting what you already know. You don't need to start seeking more and more and more.
Oh, right. Okay. So there's a few things there. There's some good stuff. So how do you do that? Because, you said you need to do the work in the background, otherwise you get into this sort of reassurance cycle. I'm not sure if that's what you said, but exact words. But how do you trust what you've heard and not have to keep going back in and back in? How did you do that?
For me, it's the exposure, I think. So the small nuggets of exposure where I've mentioned on like flight radar is just seeing as a plane. And that's the small steps, is seeing that it's the exposure that flying is normal. Everyone's doing it. And then again, the building up those smaller flights where I did Rotterdam, Manchester, Newcastle, because in my eyes, or how I used to think, was that the shorter the flight, the less time the shorter the flight, less risk, because I'm in the air for less time. So I think that exposure helped build up the things I was reading and listening to on the group and the podcast, help build that exposure up to seeing it happen in real life, like just seeing if there's a slight delay. I think one of the planes to Rotterdam, they said there's a technical problem with the plane and we were delayed and they were going to restart it. And I remembered reading on the group that could just mean that the toilet's not flushing properly, or it could be something really minor and I don't have to catastrophize. And then obviously the plane went up, we landed, and it just adds that layer of another successful flight, another exposure of something that happened and all was well. So I think for me, it really was the exposure, just because I was in a position to do so, like say 17 flights in 12 months, I was able to just, hit the ground running with, taking in the information that I'd read, seeing other people's, fears and etc. And then able to apply them to being there, sat on the plane myself, and another successful flight. And just kind of builds that armor up, I guess, to the previous anxiety.
Yeah. So I think you're right. If people have got the budget to do it, because it's not actually that expensive. Sometimes it's cheaper to fly somewhere than it is to get on a train. So it is possible, if you've got a small budget, that you could build up a little bit of these smaller flights, couldn't you?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, my cat. Oh no, it's thinking about the room. I told you I was on call. No, sorry, can you go back? Sorry. I thought it was the cat, but it was actually my child. Exactly.
Very similar.
Unfortunately, like I say, no, the flying doesn't have to be expensive at all. You've got, the airlines. I mean, we've been in another layer is that I've been able to fly business or first class, and that does help make the experience more exciting, because it's, my husband, it's business is like, boring to him now. It's just every day. He doesn't.
Yeah.
But for me, getting to experience it does add that layer of a bit more luxury to it. So you can kind of feel a bit more relaxed, because the whole experience is more relaxed from start to finish. But I would say, even if I hadn't had the opportunities to fly business or first, I would still be in the position, I think, where I would have done those 17 flights anyway in the last 12 months. It wouldn't have changed me going on those opportunities.
Yeah, so I get a sense of you that you are kind of putting it all to the test quite quickly. So with having 1 or 2 flights a month, albeit little ones, is a great way to just reinforce it, isn't it? So you're updating yourself. There was a couple of things in your notes beforehand, and you said it a bit here, and I really want to understand how you stop yourself doing this thing where you get, and I know you might have answered it, but there'll be somebody listening to this who goes, but how do you actually do that? Where you go, I trust what's going on, and how do I consolidate it? Because some people can fly frequently and it makes no difference to them. I can think of somebody now, she does lots of flights with knowledge, and it's still not quite going in. So I'm wondering what it is that you're doing,
I think once you've, say, labeled it, I think once you understand you have a fear of flying, it helps, for me, it helps that I've acknowledged that what I'm experiencing has a label, and therefore I can have a growth mindset, and I can release myself of that. And I think,
so for those who haven't heard of what growth mindset is, what does that mean to you?
For me, growth mindset means that I'm able to learn, like say, new ways that I think and behave and respond to fear, and the bodily reactions that you get, the racing heart, dry mouth, the shivering, like shaking with adrenaline and etc. The fear that you have, like the knot in your stomach, they're bodily reactions, and they're not true responses to there's a sign of danger. And I think you have to just keep, it's difficult, but you have to remind yourself that what you're feeling is a temporary sensation, and you can reframe your mind. And one thing that quite often helps me is I think of all these like travel influencers and Instagrammers that are showcasing their lives and on, and you've got their beautiful grids of all these pictures that they're taking. And I like to think, imagine being one of them right now. They'll be so ecstatic. They're on this trip. They'll be, taking photos of it. They would be, recording it. And it's a fantastic, enjoyable experience for them. And it's like, I can be that person. I just have to try and switch something in my brain. And I think then comparing yourself to someone that enjoys it, and also even to members of the cabin crew, and just that it's something. I spoke to a lady on the flight back from New York. She was a air hostess, and she'd been an air hostess for 36 years. Her husband was a pilot for BA as well. They quite often flew together. And she said, and she mentioned about the turbulence, and she said in her 36 years, she said, I've never been in a flight with extreme turbulence. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of flights that she's been on. And it's just kind of, I like those little nuggets of reality. They help me, say, shift my mindset, because I bank them in my brain, and I'm like, and I'll recall them, and they help soothe me.
Yes. Yeah, that's impressive. And it's also helpful when you can sort of link that to a person, isn't it? Because then that's a very visual way of remembering, like, she said this, and yeah, that's good. It's good.
It's like a member of my team at work. I went to Italy a couple of weeks ago. This wasn't for work. It was a pleasure. And I'd had a few bumpy flights, internal flights in the US. I flew with Delta Airlines, and I have to say they were a great airline. Everything was fantastic. It was just, I think, having come from that huge plane, flying from London to New York in business, and then I landed, and the first plane I went on was a Bombardier regional jet, and I think it was like one of those Logan airplanes where it's like one seat and two, and I think it just felt very claustrophobic versus the previous plane. But claustrophobia isn't something I tend to worry about, so it wasn't too much of a trigger for me. But it kind of, when we were flying to Italy, I could feel some of the anxiety creeping back in, and I'm like, and it was a bit annoying, because it was like, oh, I've not felt this for some time, and why is it coming back again? But one of the members of the team, she said to me, she was like, oh, she went, have a lovely time, I'm so jealous. And I remember thinking, initially I was like, oh my God, you're jealous of, like, putting yourself through this anxiety and this fear. Like, there's nothing to be jealous about. It's like awful. And then I thought, no, she's jealous because you're going to the Amalfi Coast, and it's going to be beautiful. And she doesn't have a fear of flying. And so, putting yourself again in the mindset of someone that is truly excited about, going to a new destination, kind of helps you reframe your mind and be like, oh yeah, of course that, people would be envious you're going to go to the Amalfi Coast because it's beautiful. And all there I am is focusing on the flight, and it makes you feel silly, because you think, oh yeah, because the statistics, and you just come back to that. I like data and I like statistics. But again, I'm mindful of myself that I will go into that reassurance cycle, and I have to just be mindful of it and stop yourself and say, trust what you know.
I find that really interesting, and particularly the recognizing the reassurance cycle, and knowing when to get off and how to get off, because I think a lot of people will relate to that, Collette, because it's I hear it a lot. People, they'll say, I shouldn't check the weather, but then I check that weather app, and then I got nervous again, and then I shouldn't check the turbulence apps. And just for the record, everyone, don't check the apps, because they don't make any difference to you anyway, and the pilots aren't checking those either. They've got much better resources. But I can understand that people kind of go, I'll just check. So tell us again how you do it. What is it you say yourself? Because this is the golden nugget here that people should be able to still, if they can get a little bit of Collette in their head. How do you do that? How do you step off from that cycle?
I think once you've recognized it, it's a tough one, because I don't have all the answers. Obviously I've done this bunch of flying in quite a condensed period of time, and there's been peaks and troughs, and I think it's a tough one, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a counselor, but I'm very aware, like you say. But how do you jump off of it? I think the first thing has been able to, like you say, recognize that you're in that cycle. And you have to just be strict and firm with yourself and just say, stop it. It's not going to change anything. You know, it's, it's not going to change anything. Checking that turbulence app. I mean, fortunately, that's something I've never done, is check turbulence apps, because I think I remember reading somewhere on the group or on the podcast, you know, they're useless. You know, they're not, like, say, pilots don't use them, etc. So I'm like, well, it's not. It's just another unhelpful resource which is going to be feeding into that anxiety cycle. So I think it's for me, it's just having to be firm with yourself. Like, look around and think, are other people behaving like you? No, stop it. So I need that firmness with me.
Yeah, stop it. I mean, I guess presumably you could, if somebody doesn't feel they've got the resources to do that, they could brief a partner, say, if you see me spiraling, just tell me to stop it.
Yeah.
They could be that little voice.
Yeah, and I have spoken to. I didn't often tell cabin crew that I had a fear of flying. I don't know why. I think I didn't want to kind of put that fear into the open. I don't know. I kept it all bottled up in my head, and when I did share it to someone in one of the flights in the last 12 months, I said to her, "Oh, I was feeling a bit anxious. So I've got a bit of a fear of flying." But I'd said it probably a bit into the flight, and their hostess said to me, "Oh, really? You wouldn't tell?" She said, "Oh, you know, because I'm one of those ones. I go very, very quiet. I kind of like go very in the zone. Kind of don't talk to me." And she's like, "Oh, you wouldn't even you wouldn't recognize." And but I think the cabin crew that I have mentioned it to, they've all been lovely. They've not gone over the top to reassure me or anything, but what I've liked about the responses I've had is, because I was with my husband for one of them, like saying they know that he's a frequent flyer. They kind of made a light-hearted joke to my husband, like, because my husband said, "Oh, my wife's, got a fear of flying," and he joked and said, "Oh, you wouldn't know what that was about, would you, probably, Mr. Whiting?" And he was just like, "No, I don't." And I like that, because I like the jovial lightness about it, because cabin crew this is just so common and normal to them. They're going back home later that day, or and so for me, when I have spoken to our cabin crew about it, it's, yeah, they've not made me feel, they've not focused on it, and because I don't like that. I don't want the attention of, like, being scared of flying, but they've just been there, and just their reactions have been so subtle that it's also that reassurance in that, well, it's subtle because they're not worried about it. They're not worried about it themselves. So it doesn't have to be this big thing. It's just enjoy it.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And it's an interesting comment as well about deciding not to tell the crew because you don't want to put the fear out in the open. I think that's quite an interesting thing for people to think about as well, that a lot of people have to tell the cabin crew, and they say that really helps them, but then that might then lead into your reassurance cycle. Then what if you don't get somebody particularly receptive, or they say something which is an offhand remark?
Yeah.
Like sometimes people say, when you do your job, most cabin crew and pilots are mindful, particularly cabin crew are mindful of the impact of their words. But I don't think pilots always think like that, because it's just, to them, it's not, they don't get it. It doesn't compute. Why would you be scared of this?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think one thing that was quite funny, a little bit off on a tangent, was when we went to New York. They have the TWA hotel there, which I didn't know at the time used to be an old airliner, and they have an old plane out in the grounds of the hotel, and it's still got the internals of the planes and how they used to look so many years ago. And you were allowed to go in and have a little look. And I just couldn't believe, like, how old it felt. And I was like, wow, like this versus, like, the planes we fly on now, that they're so modern. And it just, another thing that made me then realize is, like, say, it's the evolution of flying and all the security and the mechanics that have evolved since then. And think how safe it was back then. Even then it was still very safe form of travel. But then you look and you just think, oh wow, this looks so rickety inside, and you think, oh my god, I would never have gotten a plane like this. but it just goes to show that air travel has been happening for decades and decades and decades, and it's you say it's just, again, just can't, I keep saying it, it's normal. You don't have to think that every flight you're going on is that you're risking your life. You know, it's normal to go on these planes. And people do it for their whole careers. And, you know, I think I remember many, many years ago, well, I think it was when I was about 16, I was with family. And I remember my dad talking to someone who was taking a flight from Stansted to Germany. And he did that every week. That was his commute because he worked in Germany. And you just think, you know, it's so common. And that's what I think helps me, is just, you're not doing anything special. You know, you're just getting on a plane.
Oh, well, I think it is pretty special, but I know what you mean. It's like, it's a form of transport, isn't it?
It is. And again, like you say, it is special. And that's another thing I do try and say to myself when I'm in the plane, is that this is, I'm lucky to be experiencing air travel, you know, because it is, you know, looking out the window and you're flying to Italy and you're looking down on like the Alps and etc. It's stunning. And you know, flying into Crete and you're seeing Santorini, and it's, you know, it's lovely to have those experiences. And you know, that's another thing you can say to yourself, oh, I'm so lucky I'm getting to experience this. But I kind of, what I'm trying to tie that into is that when I say it's not special, it's that because I was,
I know what you mean. I take the point. Yeah, I was just ribbing you a bit. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
But no, it is. You know, I think there's, for some people, it is like, it could be a special once a year thing, and so that does fit in that category. Or if you get, you know, like if you can get budget together and try business class or even premium, it is a whole different experience, isn't it, compared to being shoved in the back. You know, my idea of hell is being in the like the back row of one of those stag flights. You know, yeah, I won't say the airline, but you know, you always feel like there's a stag party going on. You're like, that's my idea of hell. I just think I can understand why people wouldn't want to be in that experience. You know, but,
totally. Yeah.
you know. But so when you think about yourself now, then, how would you describe yourself in terms of this fear or not fear?
I wouldn't yet say I'm cured. It's a tough one, because actually I was, say, doing very, very well with the flying, up until, say, I did 5 flights in a week when we went to America. And I don't know if it was a feeling of that, because I normally fly British Airways. And so I don't know if I had that familiarity of like, I know how British Airways kind of operate, and just that familiarity that you get. You know, I'm a bit of a creature of habit. So then changing airlines, I don't know if that then added this layer of, I think I noticed someone on the Facebook group mentioned about how she was on a plane and she was quite anxious, and she said, oh, because all the blinds are down. And I remember thinking, oh, I thought that as well. I noticed that, you know, you're kind of trained in, you know, you're very vigilant of airport security and the plane procedures. And you always think you're told that blinds up for takeoff. And you weren't requested this when I was in the internal flights. And it made the planes quite dark. And one particular flight that I had out there was, there'd been tornado warnings all day. And we were sat on the plane and they'd shut the runway for an hour because the storm was right over the airport. And you could hear the cracks of lightning. I always remember thinking, well, actually, this is okay because planes can withstand lightning strikes. So I'm actually probably in a good place right now. But it was quite a turbulent flight. And to the point that, you know, cabin staff were also told to not do the service. They just had to sit down for the whole plane. It was dark because it was an evening anyway. The storm was there, and most people's blinds were down. And so you felt like you were in like this dark tube. So it wasn't pleasant, and it did. And say turbulence wasn't ever normally a problem for me, but that was quite a lot of turbulence, and it was, and I was okay because I kept saying to myself, this is normal, you know, this is normal, but it still wasn't a nice experience. And I think that's kind of jarred me a little bit because I felt I'd done so well. And then that happened. But I think looking at it on a whole, there was lots of other, you know, I was just in general, there was lots of other anxieties going around because I'm someone that's quite an anxious person in general, but being, you know, in a different country, different airline, turbulent flight. I think there were just not having my children with me. I think there were lots of things. Look at the bigger picture. And I've been on the plane since then. Obviously, I flew another internal flight after that. I flew home and I've done Italy, and they all were smooth flights, absolutely fine. So I don't know. I wouldn't like to say I'm cured. I thought I was up until that flight, which is really annoying. I feel like I've had a little bit of a setback, but I know now that I've done it and I'll do it again. So it's not going to stop me.
No, that's a good way to look at it. And to be honest, as you described that flight, I felt a slight tightening in my chest as I was imagining being on that flight. And I'm thinking, well, maybe, it's okay. You think if I went on a flight and they didn't do things the way I expected, I expect window blinds to be up. I didn't know that you weren't allowed to do that because of various rules. So a smaller aircraft with a bit of turbulence, not being able to see outside, all of these things I think would be quite normal. I think so.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say any. I've always said this: if it is really bumpy, you don't have to like it. Some people not bothered by it, and hopefully everyone will get to that. But you have to like it. It's annoying, Yeah. I go on the Pendolino trains in the UK, which are bloody fast and they lean, and I get off feeling quite giddy or quite motion sick, and I think I'd rather be on an aircraft because that's unpleasant, But and I was just thinking, so some of these things might just be normal things and also being with your kids and being in a different country. I think these are all like normal things to be a little bit like unsure of, So
yes,
perhaps it was just a combination of a lot of factors, maybe.
This is what I think. Yeah. So I'm not going to try and focus on that. And like you say, I've done some flights after that now, and they've been fine. So it's something I can just put into the bank of experience and move on from.
Okay, so here's the situation. You're at a dinner event, all right, or something like that, and someone says, "Oh, I'm a really nervous flyer." What would your answer to that be?
My answer to them would be that you don't have to be. You can, you don't have to be a nervous flyer. Don't let that.
Just stop you there because I was a little trap to see if you went, "Oh yeah, me too," or are you, that. I love that. It's good.
No, you don't have to be. I can empathize. I've been there, but I've not let it hold me back. You can do it basically.
So if I was so we're at this situation, right, and I say, okay, yeah, but I'm really freaking out every time I get into that flying. What do I need to do? Give me 3 tops. Give me some steps I could take.
Yeah.
Say.
My first one would be, what is it you're fearful of? Like, what is it? And then probably my first advice to someone would be the checklist and the podcast, because that checklist to me, like I say, it was a real pivotal moment because it just helped me understand. It's like knowledge is power, and I felt that I was informed. And once I was informed, then you can talk more sense to yourself. And I think that's what it is. It's being informed at whatever part of the fear of the flying that you don't like. Inform yourself on it and reinforce reinforce the idea that, if it's someone that is turbulence, do the work that that it's safe. But you don't, for me, it's then not then going too excessively into it. Do the work, inform yourself, empower yourself with the knowledge, trust that knowledge, and then work, say, on the growth mindset side of it, and just really, really drill into yourself that you know this. Just don't, let the pilots do the job, let the plane do its job. You don't have to. So just be informed, but then just try and use that newfound information to ground yourself, basically.
Amazing. So would you describe yourself now at all as a nervous flyer? Would that ever come out of your mouth again?
I would say no, because I think if you kind of want to describe yourself as a nervous flyer, then the next time I step on a plane, I'll then associate myself expecting that I should start feeling nervous. Whereas if I kind of disassociate that I'm not a nervous flyer anymore because I've done this lots of times, it's always going to be safe, and you're always going to land and you're going to have a great time and you're going to have fantastic memories to look back on. I wouldn't want to then, like, say, put myself in that box and say I'm a nervous flyer, because I feel that then I'm maybe taking that label with me into the plane, and I kind of need to drop that.
Nice. So where's next for you then, trips wise?
Well, I've probably Germany in September again for business, because there's an exposition going on over there. There was the opportunity for Turkey in October, but I'm probably going to send a member of my team instead, because it's more of a work thing, and they're probably more beneficial there than I would be. So I'll let them go to the Turkey one. But yeah, definitely Germany in September. Say Turkey, I'm not going to do. I've not thought any further field ahead. But my husband, on the other hand, he's going to be probably going to Japan, Zambia, Australia, Indonesia.
Fancy any of those then?
It weighs it up that am I beneficial being there, because it's for the business. It is going out to talk technical information or visit customer sites, etc. It's not very beneficial with being there. Obviously being mindful of costs, etc. So, but yeah, maybe one day. But yeah, at the moment, I could do those, but I just weigh up that I'm more beneficial being in the office and keeping things ticking over at home.
Oh, amazing. Collette, thank you very, very much for your time. That was really great. And just because I think there's a little bit more, like, I love your cognitive challenging that you do with yourself. So if you had one kind of last tip to give anybody who's listening right now who says, yeah, but I'm different, my fear's worse, or I'll never be like you, what would you say?
Exposure. I think what helped me was the exposure. Those little flights, like say choosing to fly to Manchester rather than drive. I think it just definitely just start building that exposure up. Even if it is, like you say, you haven't got the time, or the funds, or the requirement, or the need to go somewhere to do that, start building that exposure up. I think something like listening to the podcasts, going on one of the Fear of Flying in-person courses, would be the most beneficial thing that you could do. Is just exposing yourself to the airlines, to the planes.
Yeah.
And that's what I think would be good steps.
Amazing. Thank you very much. That was great. Thank you for that. Really nice. There's some lovely nuggets in there. I really like the thought work that you've been doing, and I'm really hoping that people will be able to grasp the significance of what you've been able to do by breaking those sort of reassurance cycles. And
it's hard to explain, because, like I say, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a therapist, but I was very aware that I do that because I have a little bit of I've suffered health anxiety in the past. So Googling symptoms and Dr. Google, I've just learned, don't do it. I don't do it anymore. And I kind of applied the same theory to the flying. And I realized that's what I'm doing. You're seeking reassurance, but that reassurance is, you're not seeking information, you're seeking clarity. And I've learned that, by Googling, whatever it may be, a health anxiety, fear of flying, you're not seeking information really. You're trying to soothe yourself and seek clarity in something. And if I recognize I'm falling into that trap, I know it's an unhelpful behavior, and I know that can be corrected.
Yes. And so, just out of interest, because have you been to see a professional type person, or have you done other things other than, because you sound like you're doing all of this yourself, and I wondered if you'd always been that way.
Possibly. I've not seen anyone for the fear of flying. And I think, would I in the future? Out of curiosity, I might maybe do some hypnotherapy for the fear of flying in the future, even when the need arises. Just because I've tried hypnotherapy in the past, but that was for I had a bit of a bizarre habit that I wouldn't eat vegetables. When I was a child, I choked on a boiled sweet, and my parents really struggled to get me to eat solid food again because I was so fearful of choking. And anyway, as I obviously grew up, I got over that, and I ate food, but I'd omitted kind of putting vegetables back into my diet, because I think my parents, just to get me to eat, were give her anything that she wants to eat and it's just nice. And then I grew up kind of not eating vegetables, and it was I don't know, it was around about COVID time. I think it was maybe coming out of COVID. I thought, you know what, I'm going to see a hypnotherapist about my about not eating vegetables. And she said, it was when she said that, Collette, because you're going to be so easy. She said, because you can tell that you love food. When you talk about food, you light up. You're a real foodie. She said, you're going to be so easy. And literally, I had one hypnotherapy session and cured me. And my husband, like, he still to this day looks and sees me eating like a bowl of salad, and it's just like crazy to him. And I think there is something subconsciously that you can flick a switch. But with regards to the hypnotherapy, obviously it was a big success for me with that problem. But I think, like she had noticed when I talked about food, I lit up. I loved food, and I think you have to want it. So with regards to the fear of flying, I think you have to be at that point where you want to get on that plane. You need to get on that plane because you're sick of being held back. You're sick to death of the feeling. You're just sick of feeling so restricted. And I think that's what it also is. You're just, because it's exhausting as well, not even the anxiety when you're on the plane, but it's exhausting just carrying that burden of like that fear with you. And I think if you're at that point where you really feel, I'm done with this fear now, I just need to be over it, you're probably at a point where I think something like hypnotherapy would be quite beneficial, because you're there already. Your brain's made that leap that you want to get, you want to this fear gone.
I think you're right. And sometimes people go to hypnotherapists to get the motivation, but actually you need the motivation first.
100%.
You either have to be going towards something really strongly or avoiding something. If there's not enough pain points, the hypnotherapy doesn't really take hold. It's
no.
It'll just be like a placebo. I need a session before I fly, and ethically, that's not what hypnotherapists want to do. They want to, like, see you 2 or 3 times and then out the door, because that's them fulfilling their ethical vows as well. But you need to do your bit, don't you? So, like, you were ready.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I do. I do believe that having had that successful experience for something different, I can then, like, say, apply the need and the want. Like you say, you can't go to hypnotherapy for the motivation to want to fly. You have to, like, say, you have to be at that point that you need to have the release from that burden, because you just are sick of it holding you back. That want and desire is already there.
Yeah. Nice. Well, you've dropped lots of gold there, Collette. Thank you very much.
No, that's fine.
It's a little nuggets of wisdom, and I really appreciate you. I know I kind of badgered a bit, but I was just trying to understand, because you did it in quite a matter of fact way. That's why I was like, but how do you sort of trust, and how do you let go of that, and how do you break that cycle? That's the way you explained that was really helpful, I think. So
yeah, and like you say, it has been over a while. Although I've done, like I said, that quite a lot of flying in a short space of time. When I look back at, like, say, when I joined Lovefly, I think it was, I don't know why, I think it was about 2021, 2022. So the things I'm able to talk about now, I've been practicing for about 5 years. So that's where I kind of can't emphasize the growth mindset and the shifts. It doesn't happen overnight, but it has to be a constant reinforcement. And that's where I touched on, like, little things like the flight radar app in my garden. It's something I'll do every summer. I did it yesterday. I just do it because it just helps. It's adding, it's always constantly reminding me flying is normal. And it's just, like you say, it's just, I've been doing this, like this, working on this for like 5 years. So it's, unfortunately not something that you might get fixed in a month, but if you do the work and you just keep that exposure levels there, it makes it a non-issue eventually, hopefully.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that as well, because we very much advocate the long game, and and as you know, I used to run the 1-day versions with a flight, and everyone jump on it, but I never believed then, and I still don't now, that those things cure people. It's it's only if they can do other stuff as well, you know, like it's part of a process, because it's the time that makes the difference, not the one event. And so when you think about what you've done quite a lot of stuff over a period of time to reinforce and then practice and embed, and that's why it's going so well for you now. So that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. No, and thank you very much. Yeah, so without finding Lovefly, I wouldn't have probably put the effort into understanding this is a fear that can be corrected. But being in the group, say, seeing the posts come up on Facebook each day, it reminds you you're part of the community of people and you're not alone. You know, you're not alone. And, you know, and yeah, seeing the success stories, it's like, I can do that. I'm going to be the next one.
Yeah, no, brilliant. I'm just out of interest. I mean, you're a big BA fan, obviously. What stopped you just jumping on their fear of flying course? Because they do one as well, don't they?
Just time. I'm just busy.
Fair enough. Yes.
I'm just busy. No, it is just a timing thing. I've had a friend that did it and highly recommended it. But say it's just time. I'm just kind of chained to my desk usually and working. So it's just one of those things that I didn't prioritize doing, and because working.
Yeah, fair enough. That's right. Okay. Collette, thank you very much. Lovely to meet you, and thanks for all your tips. They've been super, super helpful. And I'll let you know when it's out.
Lovely. Yeah, no, great. Thank you. And did you want me to email you a little mini bio or something? Did you say?
Great. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.